Yes, thank you, Chair. That's exactly right. I think it's been mentioned in other rooms that we might have something described as a closure report for the DMP work, but actually I think it's better to think of it, there's a piece of work that's going on starting today to amalgamate. I must talk up a bit. Is that better? So yes, there's a piece of work which is starting right now, which is around amalgamating and checking and amalgamating what was in the original deficit management plan from over a year ago, and all of the kind of the issues and the financial elements of that, alongside what will be the delivery plan for the SEND reform plan, which of course was only just submitted a week ago to the DFE on time, brilliantly. So that one needs to, so we need to have those two together. So it's not closing something down as it's done, but it's amalgamating the two things so that everyone has one set of data, if you like, and activities to work to. So you're absolutely right.
So the reason some of these I'm going to mention is more a matter of making sure that because in my head, the reason we have the outcome tracker as it is what I call to close the Ofsted loop. We asked the question and it's what I expect at some point there will be like you say, a close report, which I would ask that we can have so that we can obviously close that one off there.
Well, if I may come back, absolutely right. What we're thinking of, and I can't say for certainty at the moment, but what we're thinking of, because the DMP went to full council in something like September last year, we're trying to work towards taking the next iteration, if you like, to full council in September, which gives time for you to see it in scrutiny beforehand, because I think that would be the route, and indeed not just scrutiny, but that the member oversight panel sees it, because I think, to my mind, the most key things they need to get straight away is to make sure they've got all of the submitted SEND reform plan, but then all of this amalgamated, the two plans amalgamated, and then they work through that to inform scrutiny, and then it'll go to full council.
Okay, that's fine, because all I was the point I was going to make is obviously this scrutiny body made the recommendation for the member oversight panel in July last year, and it needs to get moving. That's that one. Then on page 22, there's the EHCPA timeliness. Just for clarity, it says it went to the executive on the 4th of June, but I think it's coming to this week's executive, isn't it? So the question I had there is feedback. So what did the executive do? But we won't know until Wednesday.
That's exactly right, Chair. It will come on Wednesday.
Okay, and then the next item on page 23 talks about capacity issues with children. That again is going to executive on Wednesday, isn't it?
That's already been done, I think, hasn't it? That one. The social care one actually went through already. Thank you.
No, I apologise. So it did. So the question I was going to ask is feedback from executive for our recommendations. So again, to close the loop.
I think what I'd be suggesting, I'll hand over to Jane in a second, but I think I was massively grateful for the list of recommendations and rigor in what the recommendations that came from scrutiny. I thought they were really helpful. What I'm expecting, and I'm pretty sure Jane's comfortable with, is that those will be part of what drives the way we report back to you. But the timescale of that, I haven't got at my fingertips on this one. But I'm sure we can work out a plan for when it's likely to come back here and talk you through about which is the best meeting to get it to, unless you're clear on that already, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I think we agreed it would come back in 6 months with an update, but if there's a request for it sooner than that, we can give a progress update, but we're planning to bring it back in 6 months.
Sorry, forgive me. Yeah, that would be fine. The only reason I mention it is because obviously what our outcome tracker says is that if it's been dealt with, then it goes green, it can drop off the next time. The bit was how we deal with the closing it off. Yes, it went to executive with a number of recommendations, but did the executive accept it is the bit that...
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, okay, so Heather, what I'm saying is, could we possibly, I know that executive went through it, could executive just confirm that they did, and then we can close that loop off? Thank you. And the final one is on page 25, which you made reference to slightly, which is the SEND reform plan. So my understanding is that the plan has been submitted now and shared with members. So my question is, what next?
Well, and indeed, I think that was what I was alluding to earlier on. So the plan went in at the right time. We are now working on this amalgamation of the plan for the SEND reform plan, but also checking off that nothing is missing from the DMP, the deficit management plan from previously, so that we have absolutely all of the things covered off. And then I think the idea with that is to then get that to the members oversight panel as quickly as is possible, and then they can feed into yourselves, and I think we bring it back to full council. You did ask a question about how does executive get to see about to oversee this one, and I just want to think that one through, if that's okay, with some help from my democratic services partners. But certainly, because if we're not careful, it will go everywhere. And to be honest, this is important. So if it goes everywhere and we agree that well, that's what should happen, that's what we'll do. But I'm just not quite sure yet the kind of choreography of that. So I'll pick that up with democratic services. But I'm certainly happy about the member oversight element, and I would be strongly considering or strongly recommending the council, full council element too.
No, that's fine. It's the reason I said, because obviously, as the deficit management plan was the property of the executive, the SEND reform plan is the property of the executive, and that's an important difference to acknowledge, because obviously this committee suggested the member oversight panel as an independent body that could dig into it as deep as anything. So that still would be the same of the SEND reform member oversight panel, strengthened, as it were. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Okay, anything else with the outcome tracker, members, that anyone would like to make reference to? Okay, we're moving on then. So item 6 of our agenda then is the Somerset inspection of local authority and children's services, otherwise known as the ILACS report that came in. There was a report there, and then we'll take questions. Members, as always, if you have any questions, please raise your hand at the earliest opportunity so that my vice chair can keep you a list of names, etc. And then we'll go into questions afterwards. Who's introducing? Heather and then Jane? Thank you.
If I may, Chair, thank you very much. I'm going to change glasses, which means you're all going to lovely soft focus, but I can read what I've written, which is good.
Sorry, just for those online, we just had some noise issues with some of the air conditioning, and we've now dealt with that.
Is that still working? Is that okay? Let's put it here. They are very directional. I'll try and keep this way and that way, so do what I can. Anyway, so yeah, thank you for giving the opportunity to introduce the Ofsted paper and update. So I think the first thing I wanted to say really was that to remind people that the Ofsted, the ILACS inspection, this is not oh, sorry.
We tried for one meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to remind people, I think we've said it before in this room, it's really hard. In fact, you cannot compare this inspection to the previous one in 2022, because we were only the second local authority in the country to have gone through a new framework. So you'd expect they're going to be covering similar things, but it certainly is presented in a different way, and it covers different aspects. And instead of having in theory, a singular outcome, it looks at 4 elements and gives a rating on each of those elements between inadequate at one end, outstanding at the other, but then with requires improvement and good in between. So it is a bit different to what it was before. I think one of the things also to say is it's really clear that there are issues where our services are not yet consistently strong enough, and we can see that, and we were aware of that. Many of them have some external national factors, but again, we have to take responsibility for what we're doing about those things in-house. So we know we've got to get better around the timeliness of some of our child protection strategy discussions. That was highlighted in the report. There were some delays in child and family assessments linked to workload pressures, which can mean the needs of some vulnerable children and families are not always understood quickly enough. They very often are, but we cannot prove that they always are, and that's not good enough. And there are challenges, I mean, there's other things in the report, but basically there are challenges around placement sufficiency. That is a big issue, which we have been talking about for some time here and looking at and trying to recover. And the availability, particularly of children's homes and foster homes. Although I have to say, we do have to recognise how much better we are doing with kinship. I believe we're now up to something like 93 kinship homes and places, which is fantastic. The last time I looked, it was 47. So there's some things we're doing well, but foster homes and children's homes were still under-resourced against the number of children coming into our service. And that can affect consistency for children in care and placement stability and too many moves and so on. So we know we have to work on those things. If you've read the report, you'll see there's loads of really good strengths. I was bowled over by the number of fantastic positive things that were coming through. Many of the children and families continue to benefit from real committed practice right across the county. Staff are making a positive difference every day in often challenging circumstances. I take my hat off to the staff. They do a tremendous job. And the inspectors identified examples of dedicated and effective practice across teams, particularly things like the strong support for young carers, for care leavers, children at the edge of care, children supported through early help and exploitation services. And the report acknowledges, very good efforts already by staff and leaders to respond, including work to strengthen the family network meetings, kinship care, foster care, preparations for children's social care reforms. So that's what we're doing already to try and very quickly adapt our services to the requirements of the new legislation coming through. There was some frustration around some of the things. Obviously, nobody wants to see anything in a report that isn't what you want to see. But I think there were some areas where, when I read it through, I thought, well, on occasion, because we had a very short inspection window, because we'd been good last time, it was only a matter of a week or so. So their snapshot of our practice was quite narrow. So on occasion, there might be a small amount of data that was extrapolated into a kind of a truism for a wider service. And you might pick some of these up, but one of the ones was around, our children who are in our care, but perhaps in the criminal justice system, perhaps in custody. And there's only 3 of them. So, if most of them are having a hard time, that's a very small number. And I know the staff, the service know more about it, and you can answer more questions on it. So on occasion, I think there were issues where it might have looked like we had done, a small sample was extrapolated out where we would have loved them to have had a bigger sample. And I think the last thing I'd just say before 2 things. One is an apology. An acronym slipped into the report. Don't know if anyone spotted it. EDT, Emergency Duty Team. That slipped into the report. Forgive us for not actually saying that in full. Those people on the acronym hunt. But the last thing to say, though, is that I just want to say a thing about this is taken from something I put into a press release, but I mean it no less for saying it here. I just want to thank our amazing, resilient staff. I mean, all of the staff who went through that process, and it's a grueling process, even if it's only short, they fully accept the need for Ofsted reporting. They welcomed that honesty. They've welcomed all of the challenges, and they cracked straight back on with the work again thereafter. So, I'm glad. The other thing I haven't said, and I should have done, is the other thing the inspectors picked up, was how good our staff were, but also how much they listen to the voice of our children and use that to change the way we actually operate. So I think it's good that they were acknowledged. So I just want to start with that, and then I'll hand over, in case I've missed anything, to Jane and any questions from you members. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I just wanted to maybe give an overview of some of the report, because I think that's really important. And I do want to start that there were a number of positives. Now, clearly, as a leadership team, we would be disappointed with the change in grading from good to requires improvement. Of course, we would be, because we're here to serve our children and families in Somerset. But it is important, I think, that we look at both the positives. That doesn't minimise the recommendations there, and I'll be able to give you an overview of how we're developing that action plan, which we're proposing to bring back when it is finalised. So we're not trying to minimise that, but I do want to start with the positives, because if you did go through the report and the report I submitted, there are more than double positives in the report than there are actually things that Ofsted were concerned about. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. And I'd like to start with the staff. We know our staff work tirelessly for children, and some of the feedback from Ofsted was that the majority of children get a really good service from our staff in Somerset, and that's really important. And we are confident as a management and leadership team that children are safe in Somerset, and what we do aims to keep them safe. So I think that's really important. I think the children's participation in what we do strategically and operationally is really important, and that comes through really positive. If we've got the people that we're here to serve telling us what you do is helping me, and when we ask to try and help direct what you need to do, we listen to that, and we've seen that coming through in the family's first work from that consultation, and we'll see that through the work that we're doing. What we also know is that some of the things that they picked up as particular positives, again, are part of that transformation work we're doing. So the family kind of group conference and that family decision making, our child protection work, again, thinking of, you heard about the multi-agency child protection teams a few months back, and that's coming back here as part of those reforms, which means we're in a really good place to take the service forward and make some of those changes, which we aim will make an impact on some of the recommendations that are being brought through in the report. We know that I think there are three key areas really in the recommendations. One, there is something around workloads, and we know that because at the last scrutiny meeting we brought a paper here where we have now got agreement to recruit and fund some additional staff to put in those areas. What we know as a service over the years, we've always been able to move resource around within the service when there's been peaks and troughs. What we've seen over the last few years is a real increase in demand across the system, so we were unable to do that anymore. So we know that in order to make some of this transformation work, we needed to increase that capacity, and we're doing it. So we know workloads is an issue. It's constantly on our minds, and we're constantly working with staff to try and ensure they feel enabled and supported to do their roles. The second one is around sufficiency. And the third one then impacts on the stability for some of the children in our care. But this report still tells us that as a corporate parent, Somerset, we are doing well for the children that we look after. Care leavers, if you remember, was a strong area in the last Ofsted report. And at that point, we didn't get a separate judgment. This time we did, and that came out as good. One of the areas that they did pick up on that Heather alluded to, but I just want to explain that example a little bit more, is that they talked about the fact that we close over 21s who are in custody. Now that was 3 care leavers. What I can tell you is in the case of all of those 3 care leavers, one was refusing to see us, and the other 2 requested that we close. We worked with them. There's records of conversations with them on their file with that offer of we will reopen at any time, and at the point you are going to be released, we will reach out again. For us, as a corporate parent, we felt that was listening to their voice and their right. Ofsted said we should keep them open regardless of that request. So that's just to give you an example of actually how that judgment was made, where we felt confident in what we had done. As a result of that, we are going to review that and what that looks like and how many times we reach out to them when they're closed, but those decisions were made based on that. Okay, so if we go on to what needs to improve, there are some key recommendations there. Then I've already given an overview of kind of the 3 areas that they fall into. With regards to the first one, which is around how we respond to children missing education, what actually happened there was an issue with the data that was submitted. We know that, we acknowledge it straight away, we told Ofsted that, and we now know what we need to do to make sure that the right data would be submitted. One of our views is because of that issue with the data, that led them to then question around how well do we know ourselves? If one wrong bit of data was submitted, what does that mean? We are confident that the social care data that we receive on a daily basis and we can look at live time is accurate and enables us to have discussions. But there was an issue around the education data, which then linked with the children missing education. Again, with regards to the strategy discussions, that was a really small number, less than 5, that they felt a strategy should have happened. Our view was it shouldn't, and we have justified that. So that was a difference of opinion. None of those children, as a result of that, were unsafe, and they agreed with us. There was no negative impact on it. But again, they felt we should have had a strategy. We felt we shouldn't and provided that evidence. But again, It's a recommendation. We will be responding to that and putting in some actions to do some more sort of dip reviews of children's files to say, you know, have we responded appropriately when we get this sort of information? So although we disagreed with it, it does not mean to say we're not responding to it appropriately to provide that reassurance and challenge across the system. With regards to sufficiency, we know that's a key issue for us, and that has been the subject of different reports that have come to scrutiny, from fostering right through to unregistered provision. There's a real focus in this Ofsted framework around children in unregistered homes. We are really clear that children should not be in unregistered homes. The only time we do that is if that child has absolutely nowhere to sleep that night, because our view is we have to provide safety for them. Clearly, what we want them to be is ideally in a family home, if it's not their family, a fostering home, if not to be in a form of residential care that is able to meet their needs. So that's the first thing about unregistered. And since the last inspection, we have a very robust system in place so that we are looking at those very regularly. I look at them weekly, probably daily normally, and they have an oversight panel fortnightly with the Director of Children's Services. So we are really confident around the oversight of that, and we are committed to ensuring that in Somerset we do not have children in unregistered homes, but because of some of the sufficiency issues we face, at times we feel forced into that position to ensure that child has a roof over their heads and staff to care for them for that time. What we also know is we do have too many children in residential care because of lack of fostering homes. We know that, and there are plans in place, and certainly Henrietta is here as our new Service Director for Commissioning, is leading on that work and continuing from that work and pushing that through. So again, what we want to do, we've got a lot of plans around fostering. We did buck the national trend last year by seeing an increase in foster carers, where other areas saw a decrease, but we know we want more. If we could have another 50 foster carers, we would not be facing some of those sufficiency issues that we do. How we get them and how we work through them is clearly a challenge for us. With regards, it talks about public law outline there, and if there's a question that comes in, then Kelly is here, who kind of leads on the area, will be able to answer that. But again, that was based on them looking at a small sample and not liking the way that we currently track those families that were involved in legal proceedings with. We have a really clear process with oversight, but again, they looked at a small number and then felt that may be an issue in the system. Again, in the action plan, we will look at that and provide that challenge and assurance to make sure that actually it was those few situations and it's not something that is more systemic. With regards to children aged 16 or 17, this is where we have worked, the team has worked with that young person to enable them to move from what is a residential care provision into that more semi-independent supported provision. Again, there are a small number where that hasn't worked for those young people. It has become apparent that when they've gone into that more supported accommodation, that actually they've continued to have care needs. So already we have in development a particular standalone assessment that will look at making sure those needs are support needs, not care needs, before we look to move our 16 and 17-year-olds. So that is an action item we've already agreed on. And then I've already talked about the over 21-year-olds in custody. The last one is around really how we ensure that leaders and elected members know what some of the issues are in children. And there was a comment in the Ofsted report about our self-evaluation, which I know I'm sure has caused some questions. What I would say about that is that until the report was published, that had not been brought to our attention around the self-evaluation. It wasn't part of those. We had daily check-ins with inspectors, and we had the opportunity to provide evidence and go back and ask for more clarification. So the issue of the self-assessment had not been brought up until the report. What we know is that our last annual conversation with Ofsted, they were really complimentary about our self-assessment. They thought it was very reflective, very honest, and highlighted areas. We will be updating the self-assessment ready for our annual conversation in November or October. can't remember which of the 2 months, sorry. And obviously it will be post Ofsted. And we are really happy to share that with this committee, if that would be useful, to show you what's in that self-assessment. And clearly that will reflect the actions from Ofsted. But it's a really difficult one to answer that because it wasn't something that flagged. We know they were concerned about that education data. We know there was a small number of cases, children's files they looked at where they disagreed with our decision making, but then to take that to that level of how well do we know ourselves is clearly a challenge for us. So that's kind of a bit of an overview for it. Shall I stop there rather than go to next steps, Chair? Yeah,
that'd be helpful. I think there's some points we'll come back. So I'll start, and then members, if you want to ask some questions. But so from my perspective, I totally agree that the report is what it makes a number of probably contradictory comments about a different way through it. However, it doesn't look very good for us, and that hurts me because we've worked really hard. I 100% thank the staff for because reading that in some people's perspective must have been a surprise. That's not the world I live in, and those sorts of things. So again, that's important. And I personally noted the really positive conversations about the participation team, and I made a point of thanking them, particularly our sick and slick, our in-care councils. I think that's important. Thank you for the update. And for me, I suppose the first question is, how are we going to evidence or argue the points that you've made? Because if Ofsted have seen something that isn't there, people are reading the report, they're reporting on the report. How are we going to turn that around?
Okay, so the first thing is when we get sent the draft report, we are allowed to comment on inaccuracies. We did submit, Claire and I did submit a number of those, which included some of those challenges. A very small number were accepted and the rest remained unchanged. So that is the final report as it is. What we would want to do through the action plan and going through those recommendations is provide that assurance to you and other leaders what is an issue and what isn't an issue, and if it is an issue, what we're doing around it. So I think that would be the way forward from here.
Thank you. So you've answered my next question. So the action plan is going to include our counters for that and where we think we really are and dealing with that. So when's the action plan coming out?
So the action plan has to be submitted to Ofsted on the 24th of September. Clearly, we've had it for 2 weeks, so we've started to work on it. So we would propose maybe bringing it back here in August, if that suits you, Chair, so that Scrutiny have a chance to question it and seek out anything more. I think the other important bit to say is there'll be an Ofsted action plan that will form part of our children's social care action plan, but that also needs to sit alongside the transformation action plan because some of the actions within that do link with this as well. So it's that overall plan that will address the recommendations.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just do 2 more and I'll let members come in. So in effect, so some points to challenge from the plan and that I'm a little bit confused about. So it talks about leadership, data and accountability, and the line that jumped out at me was that local authority leaders have not sustained the conditions for consistently effective practice. Well, that confused me. Which leaders? Officers, members, who, what?
To be fair, Chair, we actually asked the same question as well, and we tried to look at it at the various levels and look at what do we have in place that means that we can be looking at those conditions and what that means. So what we know at a service level from a leadership point of view is that Claire chairs a quarterly performance meeting that I know certainly Francis has been to in the past and Heather attends regularly, which is where the whole service is looked at around that performance, the commentary and what it means. So at service level, we have that. We then have the quarterly safeguarding review meeting, which includes the leader, Duncan as the CEO and Heather, which again reports to how are we keeping children safe in Somerset. So we do have a process in place for the various levels of leaders. But actually, to answer your specific question, I can't because that wasn't clear in the report.
Glad it wasn't just me that saw that then. But just so going, you've sort of answered partly, but my next one was talking about limitations in the self-evaluation and issues about the accuracy of performance data undermine the extent of their understanding. Because my question was going to be, we used to have QPRMs. Do we still have QPRMs? The reason I say do we still, I'm asking it because I was an optional invitee to those. I seem to have dropped off the optional invite list because I couldn't find it on my calendar because I'd assumed because it wasn't there that it wasn't happening anymore. But the fact that we do self-analysis, I think, is an important point because that having been around members for some time, I remember coming out of the previous Ofsted problems that the self-evaluation was one of the best tools that we had as a council for improving. So I'm explaining what the QPRM is as well as for members. So could I find my way back onto that list then?
Yes, and just to say, so we have, that's the quarterly QPRM that Claire chairs, and yes, you're very welcome, and if any other member would like to come and observe that and be part of that, then you're more than welcome. So we'll make sure that invite gets shared. It just would be good to know how many if you're attending in person because of the room. The other thing that we've introduced though is a QPRM a level below that, which is for the area operations managers to understand their team. So they look at that data at that much lower level because we want them to be accountable. So actually, we've got a very robust system in place to look at that. But yes, anyone is welcome.
So I just realised some of the members are looking. So quarterly performance review meetings is a meeting where staff and senior leaders review the work of their teams, and that's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
So in effect, that's where the self-analysis is the internal challenge. There you go.
So if there's been a slip in, I don't know, timeliness of visits or assessments, we'd be asking, what's that about? What's happened? Can you explain that? How do we change that across the system? How do we support? So it's those sorts of challenge support meetings.
Thank you. So I'm going to shut up. I know people want me to. So first up, my vice chair, Mike, Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Lee. Those who are observant will notice that I forgot my computer, so I'm having to use paper, and I'm finding it very difficult. You can usually just go to page 39 and the computer goes there. Yeah, I read this report. Very good expose by Jane. Thank you. Very clear, not too defensive. I spent most of the last 45 years writing and reviewing reports like this. I mean, this is a really incompetent report. I noticed the presser present, Daniel, is online. I hope you're hearing this, Daniel. It's just a thoroughly bad report. It starts with a grid of 4 sections, and then when you read the report, the sections are in a different order. You know, if a consultant had given me that, I'd just chipped it back and say, you know, go and construct it properly. Then when you start to look at the specifics, I mean, if you just take the first section, as it's written in the report, not in the grid, so the experiences and progress of children who need help and protection requires improvement. There are 20 points, 15 of which are good. And if you look at the kinds of words that are used, intervention at the right level, timely and effective service, robust manager oversight, well supported, highly effective. That's the first 4 points. Fifth one is a negative, not completed. Multi-agency strategy. There's a lot in here. I want to come back to it about partnerships. That's a negative. But then we get thoughtful social workers, positive difference for parents, effective child-centered response. These sections ought to be weighted. If they're going to conclude that this requires improvement set of 20 points, then somewhere it needs to say, well, this point has been given a 70% weighting and this other point's been given a 2% weighting. It's not there. It's a thoroughly inept report. The criticisms, what you've heard, the explanation from Jane, a lot of the criticisms are just half-baked, not properly investigated, not properly thought about. I won't go on through all of the detail. You know, the criticism on our use of unregistered homes from time to time. What are we supposed to do? Put the children in a bus shelter? You know, it's a nonsensical criticism. Lack of fostering, huge amount of work done. We're fed up with hearing missives from the leadership and the executive of the council saying we need more foster carers, campaign for fostering, more foster parents. you know, I don't think we're doing any worse than other counties. In fact, we're doing rather better. So it's a completely unfair criticism. The bit that's lastly that's really unclear is there's a lot of comment about how partnerships are not well handled, but it doesn't explain who the other parties to the partnership are and the balance of need for change of behaviour on the part of Somerset Council and the need for change of behaviour on whichever partners the council is working with. So, right, I've got that off my chest. The question I was going to ask was about the self-evaluation point, which was unclear, but we've had a good explanation of that. So I think at that point, we will move on to the other questioners. So I think it's Martin next to me.
Thank you. I would normally say that and you agree so that we have the question at the end of it. So Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine's a damage limitation question, really. Unregistered placements, we know how we get to that stage. Whatever the reason, the court order or whatever, as the point has been made, better in an unregistered place than in a bus shelter. How often are we forced into a situation where that unregistered placement has to be out of area, including at an extraordinarily far distance? Or do we have the mechanism in our control to make sure that we never have to do that? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. If it's unregistered provision, it is 99.9% of the time always in Somerset, as close as possible, because we want weekly visiting at least, and that oversight of that is heightened and strengthened. So we would look to place in Somerset. Occasionally, the 0.1% I'm talking about, if maybe a child initially is in a residential provision a long way away and they're going to do a move close by and it's for a short period of time, we might hold them there. Because that's in the area they're in. But if it's unregistered provision, this is about keeping them close here, where we can link with CAMS, we can link with the police, we can link with other partners around ensuring we're sharing that risk together, and we've got that shared responsibility.
Do you want to just clarify what an illegal placement is, in as far as, so I'm assuming it's something where, let's say, massively out of hours, the last minute having to rush, you're not able to find somewhere to place someone. So it's still, they're still protected. They're still looked after in the way. It's just that sometimes it's is it a hotel room perhaps also? Is that included? Is that what I mean?
Yeah, so what it means is it's not a registered home with Ofsted, which is required to if it's a child under 18. So yes, it could be. We do have a couple of landlords that will allow us to rent a property from them, and then we would use a care agency to provide the care for them. And as I say, we've got a really robust oversight. We do a QA check of the property to make sure, one, it is suitable, but it's also made safe to meet the needs of that child. We have at least weekly visiting by the social worker, and we have sort of that daily contact from whoever's looking after them with reports on how they've been. Usually it would come around in an emergency. So we might have a situation where they've been with the police, they've been arrested for something or can't go home, or someone's given notice on them. If a residential provider gives notice, another residential provider will not take same day. So if we cannot persuade that residential provision to keep them until we can do the move in a planned way, and we have had a provider that drove them back to Somerset before, that child, to give them to us when we said, can you please work with us? They can, a lot's do. So wherever possible, we will do a move in a planned way, but it is those real serious situations. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Nick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think following from Mike Stanton, Councillor Stanton, is there's a lot of strength in this, and well, I would just say that the word "good" appears in all four judgments, really, doesn't it? So there's a nice positive thing to think about. My two questions that I was going to ask, it's already been touched upon. I was noticing that one of the recommendations is we need more foster families, and of course, as I was reading this report, I thought, well, actually, yes, there has been. There's been quite a drive now. There's been one this week, and I was just wondering how that recruitment drive is going. I mean, you say we're bucking the trend, that we are getting more. I don't know how many more we really need. Are there any obstacles that you're facing that people would like to foster, but they just feel they can't? There's some obstacles to that. So I was just wondering a bit of an update on where we were with the recruiting. And the other one was in paragraph 38, where it says leaders know that, in the main report, the Ofsted report, leaders know that staff workloads, particularly in assessment and safeguarding terms, undermine the workers' ability to ensure some of the children receive the right timely help and support. And it has been agreed by senior leaders that the pressures have to be resolved. And there are plans in place, but these are not yet funded. And that's that horrible word of funding again. And I was wondering how you what thinking there was behind squaring up that item.
Thank you. So the staff that we're talking about are the ones that we the PAFE that we brought to the last scrutiny committee. So at the point that Ofsted visited, it had not been agreed at that point. It has now been agreed, signed off, and adverts are out for the staff, and they largely are focused on those areas that are in the report around assessment, safeguarding, family intervention, to try and actually address some of the demand that's there. So to answer that one, it is now funded. They're 2 years fixed term posts. Clearly, we've now got to recruit, which will take a number of months. So we won't see the impact of that straight away. But I think staff knowing there are people on their way does quite a lot for morale as well, and people feel listened to. So that answers the first one, I think. Sorry, the second one. The first one around fostering. So yes, there is lots and lots of campaigning going on. I think there's lots of myth busting around fostering, that we continually have conversations with people who feel, you know, to be a foster carer, you have to do it full time, you can't work. We now know for many people, if it's two people in the home, both people need to work, and there are lots of different ways people can foster. So quite a lot of the campaign at the moment focuses around that, because we'd quite like to set up a scheme that's more around sort of emergency foster carers. So they'll be on shift for a weekend, and if a child who is able to go to foster home needs one, then they will take that child, rather than not full time, but actually be on a rota, so that we've always got that availability. So that's an example of how we're trying to be flexible and think creatively. Some of the business cases that were approved, and that work's already going on around room to grow, how we help carers that maybe do work and have one of their bedrooms now as an office. If we put an office in their garden, it then frees up that bedroom, and we have some carers that have taken advantage of that and are now able to offer homes to more children. One of the things, and I don't know if Henrietta will want to come in and after me, that we have seeking approval from senior leaders, is to actually go out to all staff, around staff who could offer some form of fostering, and how we can make sure that we are a fostering friendly employer and support staff to foster. And we've certainly got the buy-in from the exec directors to, you know, do a little kind of video head for their staff to say, we will support you to do that. So we're trying to think of everything, and we certainly would welcome your enthusiasm and help to try and see how we can reach out to people, because we know that if I think our leader once challenged parish and town councils, if everyone found one carer, we would have so many foster carers that, you know, we wouldn't have to be putting children in residential if they didn't need it. So I said a ballpark earlier, if we had 50 extra carers, and that's based on, you know, that would be more than children that we've got in residential that don't need to be. But clearly, you know, that it's a change of life for people to foster, and we're just really keen to talk to people and talk with them about, if not now, when maybe, and if it's not right for you, do you know someone it would be right for? So there will be a big kind of staff campaign coming out in the next month or so to try and address that.
Just wanted to say very quickly that I just heard really in the last sort of 24 hours that Somerset Council has won an award for being an exceptional kinship employer, and we're the first, I think, organisation that's a local authority that's actually won that award. So we're clearly doing quite well with that kind of thing, and kinship is a really big part of our strategy.
Thank you. So I know that a number of us members of the council are advocates for fostering, but what I will add to your workforce campaign is please include councillors in that, because we've got 110 councillors that know people and go places. So the more we can do, and I'll remind the members present in the room and those that we a couple of full councils ago, we all had some foster care merch put down for us, and if anyone wanted more than that, I know that we can facilitate that, so that we should be, as councillors, going around advocating foster carers, as I do governorship, etc., as we go around. So just a reminder on that, please. Thank you. John, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Loving the idea about each parish council, if they all did that. I mean, there's hundreds, isn't there? Is it 300 or something daft in Somerset? How many? Oh, so close. I mean, is that just on that point? That wasn't what I was going to talk about, but that's a really good idea. Is that not something we can do, or have we done that already?
I know certainly Bill challenged some, but again, if members can take that out to their parish councils and ready, because that's also about the community then, isn't it? What can they provide for that child in that fostering family? What, you know, and how we keep children in communities, being able to access facilities, leisure facilities, schools. So yeah, a really good challenge if members would like to help with that. Thank you.
In terms of questions, I've only got a couple actually. One is not even a question, but firstly, the over 25s, the over 21s you were talking about. It was part of the need to improve. There was just the one. It was 3 in total, I think, and one you said refused your assistance from coming out of custody. When one of these guys refuse our help from Somerset Council, what happens then? I mean, presumably, do you pass that on to the police, or do you pass it on to someone in adult care or something to try and get that through? My concern really is we've had a lot of crimes, several violent crimes initiated by people who need help, mental help mostly, which doesn't seem to be being addressed at all nationally. But it could well be people, like, not suggesting it is, of course, but persons like this who are just escaping the system because they're saying, actually, no, we don't want your help. Thank you very much. So what are we doing there? I mean, it says we're not doing that correctly. I mean, it is only 1 in 3. I appreciate that. But what are we actually doing about that? And just moving on from that, just to say well done with the WAVE thing. Love the abbreviation, not what it stands for, obviously, but working against violence and exploitation. But good to see that we are doing well with that. And presumably we will now continue to press on and make that an even better service that we provide. But if I could have an answer on the 21-year-old, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the refusal was actually for a care leaver who's in prison that refused to see us when we visited. So attempts to visit were refused. So hence, you know, no. And at the point, yes, so even if they close when they are in prison, at the point of release, we would still be reaching out to offer to work alongside probation. Because for a lot of our children on turning 18, they won't meet a threshold for adult social care. So possibly their leaving care worker might be their only support from their time in children's that stays with them. So even if they don't want to initially talk to us or work with us, we will always write to them around their birthdays and at other times to reach out, and they can always come back up to 25, and quite a few do. They might say, I don't need you at the moment, but they will then reach back out. So that's part of being a corporate parent. Your child comes back and wants some help with something, so we offer. But yeah, it was actually one of them refused to see us, and the other 2 said they didn't want us to visit anymore, or didn't want a service from us.
Okay, members, I've got 5 on my list at the moment, so 5 members to speak. So Francis next, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, I can only agree about the number of positives in the report, but the tone of the report being something quite different. However, 2 things I want to mention. One is perhaps something to say, and the other is a question. We have to put up with the report that we've been given and take what we can out of it, learn what we can from it, however irritated we are by it. And it's really important not to let the irritation get in the way of what we might get and what we might be able to improve, because they're not perfect, but let's work with what we've been given. And my sympathy, it's always difficult to do it when a report has not been well put together and feels to some extent unbalanced, but you just have to get on with it. So that's the thing I wanted to say. The thing I wanted to ask about is we're back to the data and self-evaluation and the understanding and the understanding of leaders unspecified. Now, you've described very very well and helpfully the QPRM process, which I know of old. And yeah, lovely. If we can go and observe, great. Yes, please. And I think it's quite clear that's it's I know of old, and I believe I can't think it's changed, is a very good way of the service really knowing itself. And so far as the service is concerned, that's great. But there are other leaders over and above that. The people who hold the money, there's the chief executive, there's the executive, there's the leader. How does the QPRM process impact on the wider corporate leadership? Can that, is there something to be done to improve that? And how can that be made better?
I'll make a start, and then I'm sure whatever I forget to add in, my colleagues will certainly help out. There's you're absolutely right. The QPRM, sorry, it is much easier than saying it in full. The QPRMs are really helpful because that is I was really knocked out when I started to see them a couple of years ago, because all of the service get together. They come in person. They pick up the time. The service managers come and they do, they do produce these reports. They get some scrutiny from each other. It's really good. And Jane's already mentioned the QSRMs, the quarterly safeguarding review meetings, which are always really helpful to them, because that's where we focus in a very quiet but very dedicated way on the things that worry us. We're going to be moving them around on timings, because I think we had the QPRMs following their own little timetable and then the QSRM following its own timetable, where it makes far more sense if the QSRM follows the QPRMs, so that's got that natural kind of escalating and feeding, so that we're looking at data that's absolutely up to date and the most up to date manner. So I think that's really important. The job then of escalating things into executive, of course, is another whole extra thing, except that we've kind of seen it in that we identified that on the social care side of things that we were under resourced, and we were certainly at risk of burning out our staff. We were still giving a safe service, but we were at risk of burning out the staff and not doing too well on inspections and so on. And that was escalated through the QSRM and then up through into our kind of business plan writing methodology to get it in front of the new sets of, say, business plan scrutiny around inspiring innovation, all the other different things we have. So there is a mechanism for it. I think in the past it might have been slower than we might have liked it, but I think it's there. So I don't know if that would the kind of thing you'd be expecting me to be saying on that one, or what? Yeah.
So I think the other bit is about finance, in terms of linking the finance system in. So we've had a meeting, I have a quarterly meeting. I think we've been doing it for about the last year, which is called the Quartet meeting, which is me and Heather and Clive Heafy and Liz Lation. And we meet quarterly to look at the financial situation in children's services, but where we're identifying additional need or difference in need and what we think that might mean financially, so that we're having an early conversation about what we might need to do about that, and also for Clive to be able to say to both Liz and Heather, this is where the situation is in children's finance, this is what we're concerned about, or this is where it's starting to improve, so that we've got a sort of holistic view of the finances in children's services, and the impact of need on the developing finances as well.
Thank you.
Just that, given what Ofsted have said, given the lack of consistency with the last annual conversation with them, and you've got an annual conversation coming up, and there's the plan to put in, attempting to get some clarity as to what they were actually talking about, what they were actually worried about, would allow you to do something about it, either within the service or at a corporate level. And I hope it will be possible to interrogate that as hard as possible, as every possible opportunity.
Can I just come back? So I have had a conversation with the regional director for Ofsted, James McNeely, about some of the issues, particularly the care leavers in custody, because it felt to me, and I think probably to Jane, that what Ofsted was saying was that care leavers who were over 18 did not have any personal agency in saying, I don't want a service, which to me feels like a potential breach of people's human rights, that people have an option to say at 18, I want this or I don't want it. obviously having considered their vulnerabilities and trying to support them. And I did go back to him and say, are you saying that this is what you intend? I've had some response to that. I don't think it's as complete as it could be. And he's offered me another conversation to try and get to the bottom of that. So I do intend in that meeting to talk about what is the inadequacy in our self-assessment that you've identified, because we've asked this question before and had no response that we can make sense of. And anything else that we identify that we think we haven't had an adequate response for. I don't know if I'll get that, what I'll get from that response, but as you say, I think we have to try, because we owe it to both our staff in terms of what that report says and making it clear for them what that report says, also to the council, so to members and other senior officers, and to children and families, so they understand what the report says and what it actually means. Because at the moment you can hear that although Jane is doing a brilliant job in explaining to you what we understand from that report, we haven't got a clear explanation about some of it, because the wording is so vague. We don't know what some of that means, and Ofsted have not yet chosen to give us an explanation of what it means in any detail. So I am pursuing that with the regional director.
Typically, I've already noted the frustrations with the report, and it doesn't necessarily, I think, give the correct picture, and that could be judged incorrectly, and that I was probably one of the comments that I was going to make in rounding up, but I'll reiterate it now and keep reiterating it. And the newly streamlined Councillor Cravis, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a funny answer to that, but I'll leave it. And not just about my quick wit and charming personality. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. Combination. Actually, I was at the doctor's, but I made the mistake of thinking it would only take me an hour and 5 minutes to get from Dunster to here. So anyway, apologies for being late. Mine actually is I've actually got a question you'd be pleased to know. And I'm not sure though whether Claire sort of half answered one of my questions, what we talked about again, and it's been talked about before, the 3 care leavers that we closed, I think was the term you used. And obviously that was a decision that the team made with its expert knowledge and all your experience, etc., which I assume you thought was the right thing to do. But then, of course, now you've got Ofsted saying that, well, they disagree with the right thing to do, and they're like planning inspectors. Who's right and who's wrong, I suppose. So how do we solve that issue? Do we just put hands up and we argue the case, or I mean, you've explained it to us quite well, but you know, it's just that how do we think that's not a systemic problem? Because do we think that is something we just got to live with and admit we were maybe made the wrong decision? But obviously we made that decision in good faith. I'm just trying to get my head around how that stops similar things happening again. And then I think on another one you talked about, it was less than 5 cases, but I was lost which 5 cases it was and which bit you were referring to. Was that, and I think, was that a similar situation, or was that just a lack of consistency? And is that how that came about? And there was one other thing, we talked about kinship and how, obviously we talk about how well we're doing with the kinship side of things. Do we find that process, does it go as quick as we think it should or could, or do you think that's something that could be sped up? I mean, I'm just, you know, I've spoke to, and if I knew what I was doing with this job, I'd have a case put back to one side where I say, I spoke to so and so and so and so, and they did this, but I'm not that good really. But I remember speaking to somebody who thought that it took a long time, the kinship side of things, but they had the right outcome, but they would just seem to think it took a long time before it happened. Is that something we could possibly speed up?
Okay, thank you. I'll try and go through in the order you are. So the thing about the care leavers is, if we keep a care leaver open to the service, we then have to meet certain responsibilities about visiting them. And if they're refusing to see us, then that will show as a failed visit. So that goes against us. So what we need to look at is a way of hearing their voice and them saying, we don't want you to visit us, don't come and see us, but still reaching out to say, has anything changed? Can I help you with anything? So that's the process we're reviewing. But what we don't want to do is end up in a situation where we have young people open to the service that because they don't want to talk to us, Ofsted will then come and say, you have failed this many visits. because you didn't do them when they're telling us they don't want to. So that's the review in the process we need to look at. The second one was in relation to strategies, where Ofsted felt we should have had a strategy for a discussion about a child, and we provided the evidence that we didn't think one was necessary. As I said, Ofsted did confirm that the children were not left unsafe as a result of that. There wasn't a detriment to it. So yes, it was a difference of opinion. Yes, we will, as we always do, undertake an action to look at those and say, is there any learning from it? But at the time, a decision around whether you hold a strategy or not is always based on the information you have present ever at that moment. It has clear management oversight. So we will look at it. With regards to kinship, the speed in which sometimes a kinship arrangement can be agreed, because they have to undergo an assessment. They are often linked with court proceedings, which, as we all know, will differ in length. Some of that is about court timetabling, some of that's about how many assessments are needed. Sometimes a family will put forward a number of people to be assessed around kinship care. So you have to do all of that, then wait to go into a court for a decision to be made. Sometimes the family will look after them in the interim. We do a viability assessment and ascertain that it's safe for children to stay there whilst court proceedings are happening. So it's difficult because it may take a long time in some cases, and in other situations it may be much shorter. So it's a really difficult one. We always try, our aim is to achieve permanence for every child at the earliest opportunity possible. We know that there's the directive around all proceedings should be completed within 26 weeks as a maximum. We know in this area proceedings often take a lot longer, but we are always aiming at as quickly as possible so that child knows where they're going to live, who's going to care for them, and what that's going to look like.
Thank you, Jane. Ruth?
Thank you, Chair. A couple from me. So in the report, point 21 talks about children are frequently placed in unlawful and registered children's homes. That's not something that I would recognise from the data that's been shared with us. So considering the things that were also mentioned about data, can you just confirm that that isn't a data issue, that is a interpretation issue about frequency?
Okay, so two bits to there. There was coding against 2 children, one which wasn't coded right, the other which we had disagreed with, which is about a child that's placed in Scotland and the law is different. So we have that young person living in suitable college accommodation, being visited. Ofsted felt it should be unregistered. In Scotland, they don't register for the 16 and 17-year-olds, so it's different legislation, and we took legal advice on that. We did challenge the frequently because we disagreed with that, and we certainly have less children in unregistered provision than when they last visited us in 2022. And usually it's for a very, very short period of time, whilst, as I explained earlier, we are finding another registered provision when one is broken down. So I think there's two bits to that answer.
Okay, and then my second one, if that's okay, is on point 23 in the report, where it talks about a small number of most vulnerable children who live outside of Somerset do not have sufficient frequency of visits. Did they clarify what they meant by sufficient? Because there's a lot of terminology in this report which isn't very clear and is quite woolly. So what I might feel as a sufficient, or what you might feel as a sufficient, might not be what Ofsted feel as a sufficient.
Okay, so we do have to meet certain statutory timelines around visits. However, some children who are looked after may be in the care of a kinship care, who may be placed further away, but very settled and very happy. So we may make a decision in that case that we wouldn't visit as frequently because they are more settled. So from an Ofsted point of view, that would mean they would feel we weren't visiting enough. We would say sometimes there are pressures if children are a long way away, or if something happens on the day, whether that's to do with the child, I don't know, it could be a urgent medical appointment. Timeframes may slip for a bit further, which means that statutory visit isn't met within that time. But there are clear standards around it that we look to adhere to, and that's what we look at in the QPRM, and we monitor that on a weekly basis. But for children who are very settled, with their carers, whether that's family or our foster carers, then, you know, we may look at those visits certainly differently to, and again, if a child is having a quite a tricky time, we may visit more frequently as well. So that will depend around that. But there is a minimum level of visiting that should be undertaken for all.
Thank you. Andy, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I think a couple of my questions, or one of my questions regarding foster carers has been answered, so I'm not going to go into that one. The other point I'd like to sort of ask, some of our most vulnerable children that live outside the area, that live in or were living in unlawful accommodation, have now been brought back because of our Homes and Horizons initiative. My question is the Homes and Horizons still going on as planned? Is it being held up in any way? And can we do anything to make sure that that project keeps going at the full speed so that any other further children that are put into unlawful accommodation can be brought back into Somerset to alleviate some of these pressures?
Thank you. So first thing just to say is that we don't have children on unlawful outside of Somerset. They would have been brought back because we saw it as a more suitable provision because of their high level of need. So yes, what has happened is Homes and Horizons have taken children with most complex needs, and for a high percentage of them that we're seeing success through that link with education and CAM. So yes. So we also have had, you know, that some incidents where for children, you know, some that needs change and escalate. So that has become a bit of a struggle for those individuals. So we're looking at, you know, wrapping that support around them and planning. So I think with any provision that deals with children with very high complex needs, sometimes, you know, you can have 3 children in the home, and sometimes there's a need to only have 1 child in the home for a short period of time to be able to manage their presentation and what they need from carers around them. So that's kind of the first answer to that. I don't know if Claire, if you want to come in with regards to, is it moving at the pace we would want it to?
So I think with Homes and Horizons, it's obviously a strategic partnership that was set up initially for a 5-year period. So we are coming towards the end of that 5-year period. So we're just in the process at the moment of reviewing it with the Shore Trust and looking at the types of children that are coming through for that type of provision. They are quite different, interestingly, to the type of children that came through at the beginning of the Homes and Horizons process. So at the beginning of the process, I'd say we had older children, largely girls who were seriously self-harming. And now we have a whole range of different types of children. So we have children who've got self-harm issues, aggression issues, gang-related crime issues, high levels of neurodivergence, where they are, which has some links with some difficult, very challenging behaviours. So we're looking at how we take that forward in terms of have we got the right provision and the right provider to do the whole range of issues. So yes, we do intend to take the overarching model forward as it's always been, because we think that model works. We're just looking at, with the Shore Trust, what that looks like in terms of the types of provision that we need in the future.
Thank you. Mary, you had your hand up online. I just wondered if you're the last on my list, so I just wondered if you wanted to come in.
To be honest, the questions have already been asked. That's why I put it down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the couple of points then before I try and summarise this one. So some questions which I've had that haven't been covered. So monitoring the progress when the report when the plan comes forward. Who will be monitoring the progress?
So there is an improvement board, or there will be an improvement board, where there is already, where that Ofsted action plan will be submitted to, and they will oversee that with key players around it, as well as it being monitored through the service on that much more regular basis.
So would there be any member representation on that? That's the question. So so the follow on from that was, how are members going to be a part of the improvement plan?
Certainly the improvement advisory board, I'd be part of the advisory board as a lead member, and also I think my kind of thematic transformation board. So I'd be on there completely. I think again though, what I think we already talked earlier about bringing things back to scrutiny so that you could see, you know, the actual kind of the progress against the plan as well anyway. So that should be happening in any case, but more detailed and on the ground and more quickly, the advisory board would have members involved. And I'm not the only member, all the lead members would be on that one. So it wouldn't just be me marking our own homework, it would be others.
No, that's fine. It's just that I'm assuming that when the improvement plan comes to scrutiny, we may have some issues with that. But I was asking the question now just so we can clarify direction. A couple of quick points then. So placements, efficiency and commissioning, would that be one of something that partly covered in the regional care cooperative we're talking about in a minute? Yes, there's nods at the back of the room, so I've got that one right. And then so the final bit for me that wasn't covered as we went through was about workforce planning and caseload management. When we were going through the improvement journey previously, we were able to look at social worker caseloads. So the question is would it be possible to have an update on that? So where we were in 22 to where we are now as a load of.
So I think, Chair, that you'd asked when we brought the paper that's now been funded, the 1.6 million staffing, you'd asked for Scrutiny to have a 6-monthly report that included workforce in terms of the progress we've made in recruitment and the current workforce. We can certainly give you the baseline. She says, I think so. So I'm hesitating slightly. We won't be able to give you 2022 figures because we won't have those. They won't still be on the system. What the report does, it's a Power BI report. It reports on a monthly basis what the caseload numbers are for individual social workers, and it changes every month. So I don't know if there's a store, if that's archived, if the previous months are archived. So what we probably need to do is, as a service, is baseline it from June, from now. So pull that report for June so that we've got that, and then we can give you that 6-month picture, and every 6 months we'll pull a sort of screenshot, if you like, of it so that you can see the changes. And we won't be able to go back to 22.
Sorry, let me just clarify. I don't. Obviously, that's one of the emphases that they talk about. And I think that would be some of the reason why I asked that, because I was then going to go on and say, well, you might want to clarify around caseload, because I remember when we had the conversation previously, different social workers have different demands on their time and different caseloads. So you might look at you may be worth, what I was going to say is adding that bit, the clarity on it, because it would help members understand that. Because, for example, social worker A may have a caseload of 50, relatively easy, but then as opposed to some are hard, some are harder than others. That's the bit that we need to just make sure that we clarify. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I suppose we've from 22 actually we would have had it in place then. We have average caseloads, so if you're newly qualified, you get half a caseload, and we build that caseload up to the end of year 1 and into year 2. And then we would have average caseloads for people in assessment teams, because you tend to do the work as a whole family, being slightly higher than people in safeguarding and children looked after, where you'd work with individual children. But we have that in the service as a sort of document, so we can add that down. So that
it would help explain that. That's what I was trying to get at. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you have a heart attack when I mentioned the high number. Okay, so the other question I was just going to ask for clarity. So I'm assuming, because there are elements of CLA, children looked after, in this, that this report will be going to corporate parenting board as well, and whether they would have an opinion. So you're nodding to say yes, that's fine, because I'm assuming that going forward, the plan will have elements that will be corporate parenting board based rather than scrutiny. I know, and just to clarify for members around the table, am I right in this saying that realistically, the corporate parenting board is inward looking, and children's and education scrutiny is outward looking? In relation to that, there's nods at the back. So yeah, so that will form part of the response when it comes. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll try and summarise now. So one of the points that I think we came over clear from this committee is the fact that we believe that the wrong impression is being given by the report, and that we are looking to, hopefully, when you bring the improvement plan forward, there will be points of clarification for all the more controversial points that you make, so that we can clarify our position clearly in that plan. And we talked about partners, leaders, workforce, foster carer options, QPRM, in fact, the self-assessment that we came through, and kinship. So realistically, I think my points have been answered. So the questions that are relevant, as I say, we know when the improvement plan will come forward in detail and where the route is going to have. We understand, and it will also clarify who will be monitoring each of the points and the recommendations that go forward. We already are looking at a number of the points that were raised and dealing with those as we go forward. And again, that will be highlighted in the report when it comes forward. Oh, the other bit was, of course, I know it's relevant, but I know we do, but we need to, I'll say it out loud, we need to make sure that young people, the voice of a child is included in that as we go forward and where the way it works. I don't think that there are any big recommendations apart from the fact we're ready for when the improvement plan comes forward in this. And I know that Scrutiny will do everything they can to do it. Heather, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think you've summed up brilliantly there, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate the conversation. I just want to pick up something, I think it was Francis who said it, and perhaps you said it as well, Chair, and I don't want to lose it, is, you know, we may have our concerns about the kind of quality of the report that we've had, or, you know, or the inconsistencies or unclearness things, but we're not going to lose sight of the fact that there are things we need to do better and differently. And none of the team thinks that, you know, we can hide behind, oh, well, this is a national issue, or this is something that's a problem here, or it's a problem there, or we didn't like this or didn't understand this. We're going to be cracking on. You should come back. You should, when you come see, when we bring it back, you should see a really good action plan that fits in with our transformation plan and fits in with our Families First work. So it's work we're going to be doing anyway. We'll just try and make it as clear and as helpful as possible. But I just didn't want you to think we were sort of going, no, we didn't like it. You know, we're not trying to be defensive about it. We want to take the best from this.
But in the same way, it needs to be factually correct on every level. So that's one of the points that would be helpful. Members, nothing else? Okay, thank you very much for that one. We'll park that one until it comes back to our August meeting, which actually is our next meeting, I think. Yes, I think it is. Okay, so moving on in item 7 of our agenda, which is the South West Regional Care Cooperative Expression of Interest. Who's presenting that?
Sorry, Chair, we're just going to move around a little bit. So
Just doing some movement in the room to allow the presenters to be in the forefront. So members, just so you, while we're getting sorted, so we're on page 43 of our, and actually it's a little bit confusing because the presentation comes before the recommendations, but just for clarity, obviously the scrutiny is asked to comment on the proposed participation, to comment on and make recommendations regarding the risk and the opportunities available to us. That being said, over to whoever's presenting. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, because some of the members don't.
Good afternoon, members. I will introduce myself because it's my first visit to Scrutiny. My name's Henrietta Barkham. I'm Service Director for Commissioning and Performance in Children's Services. Been in post the last 2.5 months. So, and I have my colleague Julie Breeze with me, who will be contributing depending on your questions. So I will take you through the presentation, which starts on page 33 of your agenda pack. Before opening up for questions, of course. And I think it's worth noting before I kick off, just to reference the Chair's comment in the previous item around sufficiency and commissioning, that this is one part of sufficiency and commissioning and a really key and important policy driver under the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Act. But sufficiency and us ensuring sufficiency spans right the way through a child's journey, both from early help and prevention through into care, including fostering and including residential care. So all of that work around sufficiency and how we ensure that we have sufficient accommodation and support for children looked after is quite broad ranging. So first of all, just to summarise briefly what regional care cooperatives are.
So these have been mandated now as part of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Act, and regional care cooperatives are groups of local authorities with other partners which are being set up to improve sufficiency, to help local authorities act as one customer with the market, to help improve quality, to help ensure sufficiency and help us use data better across a region in order to better enable that collective commissioning power across a whole region. Because what can happen currently is that as individual local authorities, of course, we're all acting in the best interests of our children looked after in terms of securing suitable homes for them in the right areas, but that can mean that we're in direct competition with other local authorities equally trying to secure homes for their children. So as part of the Department for Education's expansion of regional care cooperatives, they invited expressions of interest between March and May from groups of authorities, and this update is setting out the expression of interest that has been submitted from 14 South West partner authorities, including Somerset, that have co-developed that expression of interest. We wanted to bring this to scrutiny at this stage to give you the opportunity to comment and to hear your observations and feedback and to influence the direction of travel. So we haven't yet had the outcome of that expression of interest yet. We're expecting that from the Department for Education sometime in July. We know they're quite flexible sometimes with their timeframes, but we hope it will come sooner rather than later in July, as delivery, if successful, will be expected to commence from pretty much immediately from September, October onwards, over the coming months and into the next financial year. The proposal in the South West builds on learning from the two regional care cooperative pathfinders that have already been in operation since last April. Those are in Greater Manchester and the South East. And recognising that we don't yet know what the outcome of the expression of interest is, your comments and feedback today will either help us to continue to develop that proposal if it is successful, or indeed if we're not successful at this stage with that expression of interest, this is the direction of travel for us anyway. It is a national direction of travel. We already have really well developed regional areas of working in the South West, and we will continue with that direction of travel. Obviously, it would look slightly different depending on whether or not that expression of interest is successful. So just briefly setting out the background context, and I know some of this has been alluded to in the previous agenda item. So in Somerset, and this is in common with the rest of the region, we have seen quite significant increases in the numbers of children becoming looked after over the past 5 years or so. There have also been changes in the kinds of needs that we see. And you can see there on the slide, we have seen a particular increase in the numbers of children that are having to be accommodated in residential children's homes. And again, some of that we've already spoken about this afternoon. We know that is in part down to changing needs and also due to not having sufficient foster carers, despite all of our excellent work locally in recruiting new foster carers. The expression of interest builds on existing regional collaboration and Somerset's local sufficiency work, which has been established over a number of years as part of the South West Children's Alliance. That's been working in a collaborative way over the past 4 years, and some of the outputs of that work have included a regional sufficiency strategy. There's been 2 iterations of that, and a formal data sharing protocol. There's work underway around a regional dashboard in terms of data and sharing need, in order to help us move towards having better visibility of availability of homes for children and costs from providers. Because the other thing that we know is that providers will not always charge one local authority the same as what they charge another local authority. They are commercially astute organisations. They will be seeking to benefit their bottom line certainly when they are for-profit providers. So we have a number of strong foundations to build on locally. So to come on to the proposed approach of the South West Regional Care Cooperative, this proposal, first of all, sets out a whole region enabling footprint. So that would include all 14 participating South West authorities. And that is to really benefit from the economies of scale and the buying power and opportunities through sharing data collection, demand forecasting and market intelligence right across the region. It will enable us to engage with the care market in a really quite substantial collective way, which should help us in those negotiations. However, the government also expects regional care cooperatives to align with strategic authorities, whether in existence currently or those planned, and through that supporting strong governance arrangements and reducing duplication. So therefore, under that wider function, the South West Expression of Interest proposes 2 sub-regional groupings, and we are in the Wessex area sub-regional grouping, including ourselves, Wiltshire, Dorset and Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. The intention for that is that we have a more aligned local arrangement that is coterminous with those proposed strategic authority areas, and there's the potential opportunity there as we move forward with the ICB clustering as well, to think about how that alignment will work as part of those sub-regional groupings.
Forgive me, before you jump on, I'm sorry to interrupt, catch you, but if you go back a slide, you said 14. There's some the group subgroups you're talking there, because I was going to say, because I've noticed to be, where's Devon and Cornwall for as well, and
so I can probably answer that one. So the 14 are involved in that whole, the bit that the regional foundations, if you like, but because the Southwest is such a huge region, we've gone forward with these 2 proposals. Devon are going through local government reorganisation at the moment, so they don't even know what their future state looks like at the moment. Cornwall were not in a position to be part of those 2 sub-regionals, so that's why the numbers don't quite add up. Does that make sense?
Julie, are you happy if I carry on?
it just saves getting to the end and then coming back. That was all.
Absolutely. Thank you. So in terms of delivery stages, assuming that the expression of interest is successful, we are due to hear the outcome during July, and following that outcome, we would then be progressing with a formal decision, which obviously will include going through governance for each individual local authority involved in the expression of interest, and the governance in terms of setting up the regional care cooperative itself. The initial stage is termed by the DFE as the foundation stage, which is really focusing around governance, leadership, those data sharing arrangements, building shared data dashboards, carrying out market analysis, and the testing of those initial sub-regional options, recognising that those may yet develop or change through that process. The second development stage is then more moving into implementation activity, and there's already activity underway as part of our existing collaborative regional working. So that includes a regional residential care framework that is in development. And there will be opportunities to explore particularly specialist provision. So where we have high cost, low incidence needs, for example, for children with very complex needs, which can be quite difficult to plan at an individual local authority level when and where those will be needed. Working at a more regional level is one of the areas that regional care cooperatives are intended to really help local authorities find those quite hard to source homes for children. So some of the potential benefits of the South West Regional Care Cooperative, and I think it's worth noting at this stage that due to the two Pathfinder RCCs only launching last year, the evaluation evidence to date has only been focused on the learning around their setup and their operation. So that is a published report and is referenced in the background documents to the report that you have in front of you today. What there isn't yet, and we have noted this on the risk slide, is there isn't yet a lot of evidence about the actual impact in terms of improving sufficiency or indeed helping relieve pressure on local authority budgets. Those elements will, of course, be covered through further stages of the national evaluation that has been commissioned by the DFE. But at this point in time of the wider rollout, that information is not yet known. So what is envisaged as being improved through the RCCs is better matching. And by that, we mean us being able to get more children into the right home, close to their family networks, their schools and their communities, through having better visibility and choice of provision in the local area. We think it will help us with stronger forecasting, having a shared data set across the region, which will help us better understand demand and availability, as well as provider costs, and that will help us collectively be better able to signal to the market what the future demands and needs are. We know from our own experiences, it takes a long time and a lot of investment to set up new children's homes, and we want across the region to be able to help providers set up homes that are going to meet our needs in the places where we need them. In terms of market shaping, as I've already mentioned, it will help us all to act more like a single customer with a stronger negotiating position, which should help to reduce some of those cost pressures through improving transparency and reducing the opportunity for providers to play councils off against one another. It will help us with joined up and joint commissioning, particularly where children have complex needs, including health needs, are known to youth justice and or involved with the police, because they're all required to be part of the development of the RCC. And it will help us in developing specialist provision for some of those small, high-cost cohorts. In terms of considerations and some of the risks, the expression of interest itself doesn't create any specific risks for us because we haven't yet made a formal commitment to that. And the expression of interest, of course, had to set out how risks through that setup and development of the RCC would be managed, including programme risks around mobilisation and delivery, management of our own statutory duties will continue to sit with the ourselves in the local authority, and there are also risks identified through that setup and governance process around getting all of those agreements through. For example, just to get agreements through each local authority's respective cabinet or executive is likely to take a not inconsiderable amount of time. Some of the areas that we felt would be interesting to explore further, and that will of course be explored further as part of the RCC development should it proceed, will be around the costs of the setup, some of the early learning from the initial evaluation that's been commissioned by the DFE, is that it's important for local authorities to treat this as a major transformation programme. It is not a small piece of work. Governance needs to balance local decision making with regional benefits. And we will need to work through in some detail the kind of prioritisation protocols that will be needed if, for example, we do find ourselves in direct competition with one of our regional partners for the same place at the same time in a given home. There will be a number of planning matters that will need to be worked through, recognising that, of course, each individual local planning authority retains those rights, and to what extent the RCC will be able to influence those to enable the right home in the right place. Harmonising data platforms is a long and complex piece of work, and requires, again, not inconsiderable work around information sharing agreements. And as I mentioned already, the evidence so far regarding cashable savings does remain limited. However, none of those things are reasons to not progress with this way of working. So finally, just to sum up, if the expression of interest is successful, your comments will inform the development of the detailed RCC design and obviously contribute to our formal decision-making process. If that expression of interest is unsuccessful at this stage, your comments will continue to inform our regional commissioning work across the Southwest. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, so just to be clear, so we've been asked to comment on this and make any recommendations. I'll start. My point about the area covered in which authorities are, I think we need to clarify if we would need to understand, because obviously there's some that aren't. I assume when it's the Southwest Regional Care Cooperative, it was all in the Southwest, but if there are a difference to that. Also, one of the first comments that I would like to make is around the pilots. Now, it's okay rolling this out and learning from the pilots, but I don't think Manchester and the Southeast have a great deal of similarity with the Southwest for lots of different reasons. Financially, for starters, urban, rural elements following on from that. So that's a point that needs to be considered. I personally think this is a really fantastic idea and opportunity, but the devil is going to be in the detail. So we would need the detailed governance structure to, because you said it yourself. I've written down, what does Somerset retain and what we don't. What happens if we disagree with something? Then there's elements that, and our children's, our homes and horizons, how they fit within that process as well. So there are millions of questions. All we're being asked for now, I suppose, is a confirmation of expression of interest moving forward. The other point if we do go forward with this, I think we need to be looking at two strands in this, because we've got the new way and the way we are, because it's going to take time to implement. And one of my concerns will be that we run too fast and we end up getting caught. So that was some initial thoughts that I had. Members, I'm happy to take questions. Ruth, do you want to go first? I have some more if you run out.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so question on the slide on page 38. You've obviously covered off Devon, Plymouth, Torbay, Cornwall, Isles of Scilly, Swindon. That's another one that we need to think about where they are. And also, is there enough flexibility in this? Because the ICB clusters are still under discussion, with discussions around whether Baines might move over to Oxford and a couple of other things that are happening. So have we built in enough flexibility in this model that we can adapt as to what comes out within the ICB?
So yes, and I think that is part of the intention of setting out the model, whereby 14 local authorities have signed up to the overarching footprint, but recognising that those sub-regional groupings are still very much in the kind of evolving stage. Where the bid wants to get to, if successful, is that initial whole region work commences, because that provides the fundamentals for the other work, and then over time those two regional subgroupings will commence their work, and other local authorities can either join those, or those boundaries may change and shift. I think the complexities around the ICB clustering is of course another layer, which doesn't currently exactly align with the strategic authority boundaries. So there are a lot of moving parts.
Thank you. Councillor Cravis, Marcus.
Well, the second one. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point between what was said about Manchester and the southeast. They're not very similar to our situation, apart from the fact they have buses in Manchester. I don't know if you've heard that. Very good bus system apparently, and trams. I live in Hope for Somerset, and buses. Yeah, I mean, my question actually was, because I think if we're not successful, and I think you touched on that and said, well, you know, we'll carry on working collaboratively anyway. But then it was that what we do already, and it was interesting when you talk about the cost of care, etc., between councils and councils. Well, in my industry, I mean, it was quite a close-knit industry, and I'm more than capable of picking up the phone and speaking to somebody in Great Yarmouth and saying, "Oh, wait, what did they charge you for this?" And then, you know, but the difference, I suppose, is that even if we did, if they've got, for want of a better way of putting it, a gun to the head with regard to replacement, do we end up having to accept prices that we already have? And would this end up, for the suppliers or the care providers, just give them a bigger area to actually hold a gun to the head of and say, well, this is what you're paying all of you now? How do you think we'd stop that? And with regard to Devon and Cornwall, obviously they're quite close, so would they get left out of the loop, or do we still end up working collaboratively? And I think you also touched on the evidence from the pathfinders is limited with regard to savings. Right? Is it about the savings, or is it about the quality of the care? And if there isn't a financial benefit, are we just managing the problem in a different way? If you see what I mean, I think I've explained that. If, you know, are we solving the problem or just managing it in a different way would probably be the way I should word that. And I think that's probably where I've got to the end of. I've run out of spaceman notebooks, so my notes are over the place. But I do think, yeah, for me, that graph that you put, well, not the graph, the 76 to 163, it's just mind-boggling. Thank you. And that's only, what, 2 years? No, 3 years, that is. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I will kick off, and then Julie will also answer some as well. So I think on your question around kind of how to stop providers holding a gun to our heads, that is kind of the $1 million question in the care market at the moment. There was a report done by the Competitions and Markets Authority back in 2022. I'm sure many members will have been familiar with that, looking at the dysfunctionality of the care market, and that very much recognised that the care market does not function in the way that a well-functioning market should. If subject to market forces, in that demand doesn't increase supply in the way that it should, to enable local authorities to find the right care, the right quality at the right place at the right time. And following that report, the independent review of children's social care that was written by Josh McAllister before he became an MP, then built on some of that and many other sources of evidence to really put forward this proposal around regional care cooperatives. So I think we probably can't answer your question at this point in time as to will it ultimately work. However, there is a strong evidence base. There's quite a broad ranging evidence base of different changes that do need to be made, some of which are are legislative, some of which are how we work together regionally, some of which are around how we, of course, do better prevention and early help work with children as well. And I know we have an item on the Families First Partnership coming up on the agenda, and I think that's another avenue that is part and parcel of the same picture, really, that we are trying to support children earlier. I'll hand over to Julie for some of the details.
Lovely, thanks, Henrietta. So in terms of your question around whether we're successful or not, if we're not successful, there's work streams already underway. So we have one around fair cost of care, where we're all sharing prices at the moment, just to try and help us understand if there is some bad behaviour going on in the residential market. We've also got a quality assurance work stream as well. So we're sharing this out across the region. So Gloucestershire are leading on the fair cost of care. Devon are leading on the quality assurance work stream. So that's about how can we work as a region? How can we share that sort of QA, quality assurance intelligence? Somerset are leading on the design of the Southwest residential framework. So frameworks are just one tool really of trying to manage a very broken, dysfunctional market. What we're trying to do is stop some of that bad behaviour that Henrietta sort of alluded to around different pricing. This will be the only way for providers to get placements. So that we're trying to take a bit more control of the market, because quite frankly, we have lost control of this market. So a framework's just one way we can try and take some control back. We're trying not to do this with a done to approach. We've done 2 quite large scale engagement events with residential providers. So they're walking alongside with us, they're helping us co-design what that lot design should look like. So we're trying to do it with the market. So we're trying to do it kindly, but if that doesn't work, we are going to be doing this anyway, if that makes sense. But we are trying to, co-design this with the market. Yeah, I think that's all I was going to add.
Thank you. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was looking at this with interest and trying to get my head around it. I think some of the things, with any new initiative, that we're always kind of working towards perhaps a new golden future. We're trying to work our way through, and thinking some of the things that I came out. It was one thing is with this trying to, in a bigger region, and we're trying to be collaborative, share things and share. And I was wondering the sharing resources, and I was thinking, I know in your slide, it's the aim is that children will be looked at more closely, but I'm wondering whether in our collaboration and sharing that actually it may end up resulting in children being looked after out of county in both ways, us receiving children from the other region, from the other counties in our region, and our children, simply because actually that's where the resources are. And I'm wondering if that would result in a slightly opposite trend to the way we've been going. I'm always nervous when a lead authority takes control of the finances, and I'm wondering if you've got a risk assessment in place where we go ahead with the work and then find ourselves chasing for the money to make sure that we're getting it. And I'm wondering what governance we have there to make sure that we're kind of what we're spending, because there's no real details where the money was going to be spent. So that was the first thing I think from from other experiences. You go through an initiative, you do your bit, and then you find yourself chasing the money for a year or so down the line. And I would just think that might be something we need to guard against. And the third thing I was thinking about actually while I was talking was metrics. What the metrics are there to ensure that this is working and will work, and who is going to be overseeing the measurement of how it's succeeding or how it's progressing. I think that's kind of my ramblings there. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. So to take those in order, so first of all, your question around could it result in more children being looked after out of area? I think that will, of course, be a key aspect that every local authority has an interest in mitigating against. While there would never, I don't think, be a guarantee that no child will be placed out of area, the point of all of the local authorities working together more closely in the region is to better enable children to stay close to their families, their communities, to maintain those contacts with schools, with birth family members and so on. So exactly how those placement protocols might work is absolutely a key area that will be developed through the excuse me, through the foundation stage, and we would certainly be looking at building on any learning that comes out of the pathfinders on exactly those points. In terms of governance and around where the money is going to be spent, so the model that the South West Expression of Interest has put forward is for a lead local authority to manage the grant, because that's what it will be from the DFE. So that lead authority is South Gloucestershire Council. So they will, to all intents and purposes, hold the risk on the correct management of that grant funding, and will be the authority that is required to report back to the DFE on the spend of that grant. The grant funding that is available to us as part of the bid is only covering the rest of this financial year and next financial year. So the intention after that is that RCCs become self-sustaining. Again, of course, that will be something that will need to be worked through in greater detail as part of the development of the RCC. The intention with that initial funding is that it's used, for example, to second staff into the RCC to then work on that full time. And I think that's where the added value will really come if the expression of interest is successful, because obviously, as Julie's outlined, there's a huge amount of work underway already as part of the South West Children's Alliance, but that work is being predominantly undertaken by staff, including Julie, as part of their broader remit. So that that additional capacity that the grant funding for the RCC will offer will help accelerate delivery of the RCC. In terms of the metrics, there are, of course, also metrics set out by the DFE, and they predominantly, during these early stages, relate to the areas that I summarised in the presentation around shared data agreements, information sharing agreements, having a platform, having a shared sufficiency strategy, having a clear direction in terms of market shaping. It's those kind of foundational, fundamental areas that the RCC needs to build on before it can then start actually delivering better quality homes for children closer to where they're needed.
Thank you. John, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of, I'm just a little bit concerned. I mean, overall in favour, as our chair is, which I think is the right way. But I'm just a little bit concerned about it. It is very, very vague, and I guess, which is the idea of it in a way, isn't it? 'Cause we're just sort of establishing the thing. We're trying to get it established. The other counties involved in this obviously have things similar to us, but I'm concerned about the Devon Cornwall part. I've just been looking up the Devon vesting day for their new council, which will be April 28, but their actual shadow council, which we had the same thing here, will actually be next May, which is the same time as our elections. So I would have thought then they would be able to perhaps come with us and join this. I think that's really important, because I'm assuming we have several children in Devon and vice versa. So I think that's very important to include them in this. I'm not sure about Cornwall. That's it. That's quite a way off, obviously. In terms of the actual costings of this, there's no obvious savings involved here, although there would be more money, I presume, in funding coming through. I did see the funding amounts here at 600,000, which isn't a lot of money, and £1 million, again, not a lot of money. Was encouraged by, if this is to be the case, the number 10 North thing that came out in Burnham's speech today, where he was talking about that will happen, and he will basically govern, so each area can govern itself, which seems like quite a good idea to me. So I'm assuming he did mention the Southwest once, I think, in his speech. So the Southwest would hopefully have its own sort of governance level with monies coming in that way, and maybe this can be sorted out via that as well. So it may well be everybody will be on the same side. In terms of staffing, which is a concern, we're having problems at the moment. We are short-staffed throughout this sector. Do we have the capacity to cope with this? You mentioned lots of additional work would be involved to get this off the ground. Are we bringing in people? I'm assuming that's why you've come in the last 3 months or so, and welcome, obviously. But is that where we are? Are we increasing our staff levels to actually do this piece of work? Or is there something as an additional cost? Can we afford that as a council? And the other part I was going to ask has now been asked already, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions and comments. I think, first of all, on the kind of matters relating to Devon, yes, you are absolutely right. We do have a number of children living in Devon currently, and, you know, we would very much be, of course, seeking to work with them as indeed with all the other authorities in the region. And I think, just to emphasise, all 14 authorities have signed up to this initial expression of interest. The sub-regions are simply the initial areas that, in accordance with the timeline for the expression of interest, we would be proposing moving forwards with in terms of some of that closer working. It absolutely doesn't mean that any of those authorities are kind of excluded from that. In terms of the money and the staffing and whether we have capacity, I guess just to clarify that the funding as part of the expression of interest would then go to South Gloucestershire as the lead authority, and the intention is that staff would then be recruited or seconded to do that work for fixed term periods. So there is a full breakdown of the staff that would be recruited or seconded to do that regional care cooperative setup work over the course of kind of 18 to 24 months. So that resourcing wouldn't be something that Somerset Council would be bearing the cost of. That is kind of the exact benefit of the RCC bid. And just to clarify, I'm a permanent member of staff at Somerset Council, so I'm not about to be whisked away to do RCC specific work. Does that fully answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, of course, I welcome anything which can bring order and security for children, of course. There are things which I wonder from past experience, since when the financial and legal responsibility for children sits with the local authority, it's amazing how badly behaved some local authorities can be, as well as the providers, in terms of offering over the odds or whatever. And I mean, there was the Peninsula framework, there have been other frameworks. They've in the end not worked well enough. So the first question is, what learning do you take from it not really having worked in the past, and how do you see that working through both in the expression of interest and then whatever happens to that? So that's one question. And another one is that I don't know whether it's true these days, but it used to be said that there were far more homes in Somerset than were needed for our children, but they were just being occupied by children from elsewhere because Somerset has cheaper property than, say, London or whatever. And certainly engagement with providers that I've been involved in the past, they were very clear that they were not prepared to have all their eggs in one basket. They were going to choose which parts of the country they were going to engage with. And how does this, and at the moment it's expression of interest, but whatever happens, look as though, how does it think it can influence the behaviour of the providers who would prefer not to have all their eggs in one basket? because that feels to me quite a risk to this really working, unless you had a countrywide one system. And I think the final one is the $64,000 question: is why does that mean they'll bring their prices down? Anything that we do, so those are the things I think that I hope are being taken into account.
Thank you for those questions. I will kick off with some answers, and then Julie may want to add to my answers as well. So in terms, first of all, around kind of what learning are we taking from either past regional work or indeed from the Pathfinders and other regional working, and what might help us as local authorities work better together. I think there absolutely is learning there. I think there's learning around the right governance needing to be in place and the recognition of the time that governance takes to set up. I'm bringing some experience from having come here to Somerset from a London borough, where there was some similar regional collaborative work underway in order to set up a secure children's home for the local authorities across the region. That is a multi-year project, and I think there's absolutely learning come out of the regional care cooperative pathfinders around the importance of that governance and of getting that right, because I think that helps all local authorities work together in a really productive and clear way. Secondly, your question around numbers of places in Somerset in terms of residential homes. I believe we do have enough places in theory in Somerset, so you are kind of right in that respect, in that if every place in a residential children's home in Somerset was occupied by a Somerset child, we would in theory have sufficient. I think what's really important to remember about sufficiency is it is very much about what that child needs at the point that we are seeking a home for them. And many children have such complex trauma and vulnerabilities that they're not always able to live with specific other children. There may be certain shared histories, shared vulnerabilities that mean that we cannot always place a child. It's not always the right home for them, even if we have a vacancy in what potentially is the right area. So it's not a straightforward jigsaw puzzle of, oh, we've got a space there, we've got a child here, we can match that child to the space. And I think all of the local authorities will be absolutely appraised of those complexities, and where we will be seeking to get to over a period of time is the gradual shift of being able to place more of our children locally, and having to place fewer of our children at a greater distance. Part of that jigsaw puzzle, of course, is around influencing provider behaviour as well. So to your question around how we might seek to influence better provider behaviour, I think part of that is very much about the regional care cooperative being able to influence the providers that come and set up in the area. So, for example, we know nationally that around, I think it's 85% of all children's homes nationally are run by private profit-making providers. Now, I'm not knocking profit in and of itself. However, that is not an equal distribution. That is not making the best use of our voluntary and community sector providers, for example. And there's a whole host of complex reasons around that, some of which include the amount of financial resource that is needed for a new provider to set up, and the amount of time it takes them to get registered by Ofsted. So through the RCC, we would certainly be seeking to increase mission-driven providers who are seeking to set up for the right reasons in the area in order to help balance some of that adverse provider behaviour. And I think your final question, will any of this mean that they will bring their prices down? I think, as Julie alluded to earlier, if we are collectively the only customer in the region, while it certainly isn't a surefire way for them to bring their prices down, it is reducing a certain amount of that interlocal authority competition. And over time, as RCCs begin to cover the entire country, private providers should be dealing with something in the region of around about a dozen customers rather than the 150 odd that they currently deal with. So we would we would expect that to have some mitigating effect on prices. Is there anything you want to add, Julie?
No, the only other thing I was going to add, picking up on Francis's point around, we do have enough beds in Somerset. What we don't have is the right type of beds. So I think there's a piece of work we need to do around some of that specialist provision. For example, we don't have any what we call crisis homes, so those sort of outward bound type 12-week assessment type homes. We don't have many of those in the southwest at all, and we also don't have very many voluntary and community sector providers either. So part of this work will be to try and encourage some of those providers to come and set up.
Thank
you very much. That's really, really helpful. The bit though that still rings in my head is well, actually, we don't want to have only one customer. We are going to try to seek children from elsewhere in the country, way out of area, simply to spread. This is from the provider. Spread our risk, and it's that as we'll have to influence as well as the kind of places that we need. And yes, absolutely, we need the right place for the right child.
Okay, I think there's a couple. We are running on, members, but there's a couple of points I want to cover. The one that I thought Francis was heading towards. It sounds really good, but what about our statutory requirements? How will our legal requirements be impacted by this?
So just very briefly, our statutory duties around being the corporate parent for our children looked after remain with each individual local authority. So there is no intention for that to change.
Okay. Yeah, but it's still there, and we're giving someone else potentially the oversight there. Statutory duties, placement. Yeah. So if a placement fell, then in this new world.
So the way we are designing the Southwest residential framework is that each local authority's home finding team will still secure those homes. So in the Southeast, they are setting up quite a large team where all of the commissioned homes will be done from that central team on behalf of I think it's 15 local authorities in the Southeast. Whereas what the Southwest are proposing is that each local authority still maintains those local relationships, because we are worried that we will lose, and a lot of this market relies on strong relationships. I don't know if that answers your question, Lee. Sort of.
And this expression of interest, I think, is a good thing. But the problem is it's going to be the devil's in the detail. There's so many bits. I know I'm telling something that you already know, but so I'm assuming members. So I'll try and. So I think we're supportive of this, but we need to understand the detail to be able to. So we need each step identified. You know, the legal elements, the financial costs, the workforce costs, the timeline around how it's working going forward. I think that's vital, and it's not there yet to see where we are. I think for me, the risk that not everyone in the Southwest is in the same boat as us is in the same is a risk, because we can go to Devon because they're not in, or we can those elements there that which are problematic. And I've written governance because that's there. So we're being asked for a position. So I think realistically the committee supports the collaboration where it improves outcomes for children, but the regionalisation must not become a route to dilute accountability. I think that is there. Unclear financial risk. We got to ensure that there's democratic oversight in this as well. So I suppose we're supportive, but the test must be whether it's demonstrably improves the process and the stability of our children looked after. I'd add another risk that I hope we'll be able to clarify is the risk for Homes and Horizons. we are miles ahead of a lot of people when it comes to our own children's homes again. And if we start putting those into a pool, how is that going to impact the steps that we've made going forward? I don't really. It's more. I'm conscious that I'm summarising. So in effect, the members, I think we've covered all the points that are there. So yes, but let's see the detail and be careful with every step. Is that, sorry, could you microphone?
If I could add 1.5, the half is to say, yes, absolutely, the scrutiny is hugely important. And the experience of the Regional Adoption Agency is that it was very difficult at stages to achieve the kind of scrutiny that we ought to have, given that somebody else was the lead authority on it. So that's a thing that we do need to be really careful of. And the other one is assurance on the quality and the capacity and abilities of the lead authorities in the various parts of the work, about which we as a scrutiny committee have no idea. And reading their Ofsted reports may or may not help us.
And I'm conscious that we're lacking a lot of the detail that we need there, because the point I was then going to go to, obviously, overview and scrutiny involvement in this, because from my experience with the regional overview and scrutiny body that's in place, I'm not overly excited by it, because it doesn't. I think we need to be clearer on where we're going with this. So yes, so overview and scrutiny, I think, is an important element, but we need to, as this goes forward, can I ask, I think that it comes back to us so that we make sure, and I won't put a timeline, but you need to give us an indication of where it is, because I don't want to lose sight of it. Members, I think I've covered as many points as there's there. It's a positive thing, but we need to, the devil will be in the detail, I think.
Absolutely. So I'll just come back on the timeline point. So obviously, if we hear that the expression of interest has been successful, we should hear in the next sort of 4 or 5 weeks or so. Work will then be progressing at a pace. So I would suggest that we may be in a position to come back, if not the August scrutiny, then certainly the September scrutiny, because proposals will be having to go through each council's respective governance processes anyway. So we will bring it back as soon as possible. As you say, it's a balance between wanting to bring things at a sufficiently early point that we get your feedback before the detail has been worked up, versus, of course, then bringing proposals back at a more complete stage. So thank you.
I'm assuming this goes next to executive next for them to be, or that you taking our position and then moving forward.
So this outline of the expression of interest hasn't been tabled for executive, because the formal decision around progression would of course be going to executive with all of the detail that you have alluded to. So this has just been tabled as an update for comment to scrutiny. Okay,
thank you. Okay, members, we'll move on. Just for clarity, members, I'm conscious of time, and I think just to be clear, I think we have a way forward. So because the next presenter has to go, we're going to move on to the next item. So if you need a comfort break, just go and take it as we go. What I was going to say is that item 9 of our agenda, which is the review and update on the Statutory Youth Justice Board, I think we could deal with in a more informal way. We approved the plan itself. We approved the plan last year, and there have been updates that suggested. And what I've asked is that the updated plan be shared with us so that we can review any. Are they tracked changes there? So the changes, but we have to, obviously, I'm assuming most of you would have read the report in front of you, and we can take it. So what I will say, unless anyone screams objections, I have clarified this, that we'll move the update of the justice plan to an email, and ask that if anyone has any points or comments in relation to it, then they can come back to that. Otherwise, we take it as read. We did agree the plan last year, so there are only minor changes. That drops that item off of our agenda, members. So we still might be heading for a 5 o'clock finish if I can. So without further ado, I'll move on to item 8 of our agenda, which is the Family First Partnership Programme. And Kelly.
Thank you, Charles. Just as a way of introduction, you'll remember a few months ago there was a presentation here on the multi-agency child protection team pilot, which is one of the pillars of the social care reforms. And the purpose of this presentation today is to give an update around 2 of the other pillars, namely the family group decision making and family help. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly, who is leading on this work.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself because it's the first time at Scrutiny. I'm Kelly Brewer, Head of Service for Help and Protect, so oversight of assessment and safeguarding teams in the front door in Somerset and leading on 3 strands of the Families First Partnership Programme. I think that you'll be aware from previous discussions at Scrutiny that the Families First Partnership Programme is a national initiative that all local authorities have to operate slightly differently, being rolled out by April 27. And the main focus of the Families First programme is a shift towards intensive early help for families and focused, skilled, expert multi-agency child protection teams with a focus on family networks. So breaking that down, for family help, that brings together targeted early help and child in need. For multi-agency teams, that looks at bringing multi-agency skilled professionals to ensure that the right decisions are being made at the right times for children and preventing duplication. And for family group decision making, talks about empowering families to lead planning. So focusing on the family group decision making element first, our vision in Somerset is that family-led practice becomes a golden thread throughout Somerset Children's Services. That first interaction with families, we're exploring their family network, that we understand who those significant people are in children's lives. That goes across the partnership, but a real focus on our family front door when those initial referrals are made to Children's Services. And it talks about families being empowered to lead planning when safe to do so. Why we think this is important, because what we hope to do is keep children safely within their family networks, if that isn't within their immediate family, but who else is there within their extended network, their communities. That actually we're only using statutory intervention when it absolutely is necessary. And as I've said, that plans are co-produced with families. So what this means for us in Somerset and what we'll be offering is the Families First tells us that that has to be a mandatory offer when we enter into a legal framework. So when children become subject to public law outline, there has to be a family group conference offered, which is delivered by an independent person. In Somerset, actually, we're bringing that down to initial child protection conferences as well. But as I said, that discussion should take place with all families at the earliest opportunity. That actually we shouldn't be coming to child protection meetings. We shouldn't be coming to a legal framework and not knowing or identifying who is in a family's network. There's also a triage at our family front door, and we're currently looking at actually what work we can do there to support families where there wouldn't necessarily need to be a statutory intervention at that time, but if we could convene a family group conference, that may prevent that child coming into statutory services. And that family group conferences by an independent person will be held when we're looking at reunifying children back to their family network. On top of that, we will have practitioner facilitated family meetings, and they will happen across every opportunity that we meet and we review children's plans. We don't want them to be separate meetings, but what we want to do is to introduce family significant others to child in need meetings, child protection meetings, looked after reviews, etc. Okay, so progress on family group decision making in Somerset. So April, we saw the launch of family group decision making across children's services. We've increased our workforce, so we've doubled. Annually, we do approximately 250 family group conferences. The hope is that we double that with the additional resource that we've introduced. That actually family-led practice is becoming more clearly defined and a consistent part of how we work with families, how we talk to them, how we interact, and how we include them in different meetings. That guidance has been created along with an updated family plan, and that family plan follows that family through their journey from family help to statutory services, and that we update it when the need or the risk increases. We've created a one-day family-led practice training, which is being rolled out to the workforce, and we're identifying champions within each area office. And then we've got the front door pilot that I just spoke about that we're currently completing to look at actually could we introduce an independent person into a child's life earlier that may prevent statutory intervention. Okay, so moving on to family help. So family help talks about help and support being at the earliest opportunity for families, that actually we need to wrap that support round a family at the earliest opportunity to prevent those needs increasing and that risk increasing, and that actually that is a targeted support and that's delivered by a multi-agency network. That starts at our front door. The reforms talks about an integrated front door. In Somerset, our children's services teams are currently co-located with our police staff at Express Park. We have lost some of our multi-agency partners over the years as part of that, but actually as part of the Families First reforms, we will be introducing them back to the family front door. We've got a pilot occurring or starting in October from health colleagues where we will have one health rep at the front door that has access to a number of health systems. Currently for social workers, we have to go out to 3 or 4 different partners, Somerset Foundation Trust, Public Health Nursing, the ICB. We will have one partner who can access all of those systems, pull all of that information and make decisions a lot quicker for children and families. Thank you. I think I've covered the rest on there. Okay, so progress in respect of the family help element. We have designed a single assessment that we are going to be launching as part of a test and learn in the East. And that's part of our Families First duty and response team, which is one of the pillars in respect of multi-agency working. Why we've done that is for families to have to stop repeating their story. Sometimes we can see that families will be referred to one agency, stepped up, stepped down, stepped across. And actually what we need to do is have that one assessment that follows them and then the plan adapts to that. We've talked this afternoon around the additional resource that has been agreed across children's services. So our current adverts are out. That will mean that we'll get an additional team within each safeguarding team across the locality made up of a social work team manager, 2 social workers and 4 family intervention workers. We hope for those teams to be in operation by October. Phase 1 of that work will look at our current children that are open on child in need plans of 9 months plus to review their intervention. Actually, has that been meaningful? What are we doing? Do we need to step them up? Do we need to step them down? But importantly, are they getting the right intervention by the right professional? Phase 2 of that work will look at how actually we merge our prevention teams and our social work teams. So how we really create that family help team. What we know is that the reforms tell us that we can have alternatively qualified staff who can be supporting children on child in need plans, and that we can have expert social workers work alongside them. So that we have that one family, that one assessment, and that one plan that follows that child through their journey of need. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you for that, Kelly. Members, any questions? I'll jump in then. So thank you for the report. You talk about the recruitment of what's plan B if you get to October and they aren't, you haven't been able to recruit?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chair. I think if we're not able to recruit, I think we will look at phase 2 being earlier. What we currently know is we have really good relationships with our prevention teams. I think that will be a time where we have to reevaluate our proposal and look at actually whether we should be moving forward earlier around merging prevention and child in need teams to help us focus on the Families First Partnership Programme initiatives.
Okay, I read the report and I listened to the presentation, but what's not working? What doesn't it say there? Is there anything that isn't working that you've had to change? What could we do better? Are they?
No, thank you for the question. So I think currently in respect of our family group decision making, that's something that I'm really proud of, that we've been, I would say, ahead of some local authorities in Somerset. And I think what's really helped us around that was recruiting a specific member of staff who launched our family group conferencing team in Somerset. So she came back, she's been able to lead, she's been working closely with other local authorities who are sort of looking at the model that we've approached. So I think that that's positive. I think the second phase of that, of, you know, what further work do we need to do is rolling that out to the service. So, you know, we've heard today around the work that our social workers are doing, but we need to make sure that those conversations are taking place at every opportunity, so it really is embedded into practice. I think the second question, really to cover family help teams, I sort of talked about it initially around partners. We're working really closely with them. You know, this isn't just around children's social care. The Families First Partnership Programme is really clear around the multi-agency partnership and the ownership around the work that we do at a family help level and a statutory child protection level. I think it's been really positive, the work that the police have done with us. And I think when we come back in August or September to talk about the multi-agency child protection teams, you'll hear about some of that good work and the improvements that it's made. But we're still on a journey with some of our partners around actually what does that mean and how can they support us with that multi-agency element.
It's one of the issues that we've done. I noticed that the question is about the remaining pillar is information sharing. One of my favourite subjects, and the data, in the fact that everyone's talking about different sorts of data these days. That I'm assuming that's what can. But the multi-agency working is on par at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are doing a test and learn in the east of the county. That predominantly is with our assessment teams. The Yeovil, the South Somerset office, has been co-located with the police since April. By August, our Mendip team will be co-located there. Single assessment, we'll be launching that in September. That will actually reduce the current timescales in respect of our children and families assessment. So we are going to work with a 20-day assessment. You would have heard this morning around some of the feedback from Ofsted talked about some of our assessments being delayed. You know, are we able to identify the needs early enough? We've changed our duty system in response of that and how our teams are made up and able to respond and make sure those assessments are done in a timely way.
It's interesting because my next question was going to be, how does this address Ofsted's concerns? And well done, you. Okay, members. So we're not a bit. Thank you, Andy. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. It's just a bit more clarification on the plan B, basically. If in phase 2 you're going to merge the 2 social teams anyway, why are we then recruiting and going through that pain, spending that money and then merging the teams that you said we're going to do in the first place? Why don't we go straight to phase 2?
If I can, you're happy for me to come in there? Yeah, if I can come in there. I think that why we've gone with phase 1 is that we recognise the current capacities within children's services. So you'll know that the paper that came to scrutiny before was saying that actually we do need to increase our current workforce, that actually there is a stage and a process that we need to take in respect of more statutory social work teams, so that when we look at the model of 2 social workers, 4 family help workers, to be able to make some of the changes we want to do with the multi-agency duty and response team. We've had lots of reflection around actually what is the right model to go with, but we do feel that we need to do that first period of resetting what our current workload and capacity is to be able to fully move on to the family help model.
If I can just add to that, I think the biggest risk would be if we have to go straight to plan B, we risk it slowing down and our ability to meet the reforms by next April. I think there will be a risk there.
Thank you, Andy. I think one of the things that I would find helpful would be a flow chart in this, so that we can see how it goes, because obviously the depending on the need, depends on the route and stuff like that. So that might be helpful for us to if you would consider, because that would, for me, pictorially, it's a child who's identified at risk, what next? That sort of thing that would be helpful. Okay, members. So with this one, members, we've been asked to note progress, which I think we've done, and recognise the fact that the 2 pillars. Has to recognise that this report covers the 2 pillars with multi-agency child protection teams have previously been reported to us, and the bit that's there relevant is the only real decision here for us is to consider whether an update on the remaining pillar should come to scrutiny. Yes. Purely because it's information sharing, and I think fundamentally there's so many of our strands that are relevant to that, so it would be interesting to understand. Jane.
So with your permission, could that come at the same time as the multi-agency child protection teams coming back? Can we schedule that?
Yes, that's fine. the thread that runs through everything for me is information sharing, and I think if we can get that right, then it will make our lives, you know, the fact that different agencies have different identifiers, which then creates different, and the fact that we can't necessarily share the data still, because those of you in the room remember that the first item on our agenda when I became chair of this committee was data sharing, and we've still got a bleeding problem about it, and that's frustrating. The flow, I mentioned about the flow chart. I've talked about the how we're evolving to meet Ofsted's issues, so that's relevant there. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else on that one. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for that. Okay, so members, so moving on. So agenda item 9, just to be clear, we're going to send out a copy of the updated plan, the youth justice plan, so that we can look at, and it's on you to come back if there are any concerns. As I said, just for the decision-making process, I know I've spoken to the executive member, but the relevance for this is that we agreed the plan previously and it's just being updated, so we shouldn't have any issues with that. Moving on then to our forward. Oh, sorry, Ruth.
Sorry, Chair, just something that I've noticed on page 73. Talks about the fact that they've commissioned people, participation people, to understand children and young people's voices are heard. I would love to know why we chose to get an external person, considering we've had Ofsted reports saying that our child participation is good in some set, why we didn't use our own team. That'd be my first question. And also it talks about whether we want to have that come back here as scrutiny or to you as scrutiny chair in July. And I just wondered if that's something we needed to decide today.
Thank you. I was just gonna come in, Chair. Thank you. I think Sam might still be on the call, but certainly I was working in some of the rooms with the people. I'm going with the full name of it, really, participation people, and they did do a really good job. Not so much of saying with our own children, but about the bit about holding the officers to account about what they were doing and running a few kind of workshops with them and getting them to, in a multidisciplinary sense, it wasn't just about our social care team, but also police and probation and other partners, doing that kind of work about making sure that the practice and it was actually as child-centered as it could be. I think one of the things that came back from the assessment by the participation people were that actually we were actually the service was really quite good at it. What I don't know, but Sam might know if she is on the call still, I'm not sure if she still is. Oh, she is, just popped up, as to why that particular agency was chosen. But certainly I did have some exposure to what they did when they were there. But Sam will put me right if I've misled on the work they did, but I was in a lot of the rooms with them when they were working. Sam, welcome to the room.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, just to confirm, participation people were commissioned. They work on a recommendation to us. They work with a lot of local authorities nationally, and this piece of work was around it was a diagnostic piece of work, not like an inspection or an audit or an evaluation, a diagnostic piece of work around our partnership. So as a youth justice service, we are a partnership. It's not just about local authority staff. The local authority hosts the youth justice service, and they were there to come and find out what we do well with engagement with young people and families and partners to ensure we're capturing the voice of the child and that it is making a difference to outcomes for children and impacting on service delivery. So it's quite a big undertaking of interviewing a range of 30 professionals across the partnership, reviewing 83 documentation, meeting with teams, doing workshop exercises with our board and our staff members, And the next phase of that is to triangulate all the information they've gathered to conduct 2 youth engagement events at the end of July before they then produce us an action plan and roadmap of how we take this forward. And as Heather has confirmed, what they have found initially is that we gather a lot of children's voices and we don't need to get more. What we need to improve is then what we do with that information and how we close the loop on that. What difference does it make to the service we offer, to communities, to the partnership, and how we can improve that going forward. So it's been an absolutely amazing, engaging piece of work that we've been doing with them since January.
Sam, thank you. Did that answer your question?
It's just, I suppose, that part, Chair, do we want it to come back to scrutiny, that report, or are you going to review it?
No, I think I'd like to see it with the view to it coming to us, but we'll see what it says. So yeah, good, well spotted. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Okay,
Thank
members. So our forward work plan, my computer's decided to not connect to the Tinternet at the moment. So Jack, would you just run through what, because our next meeting is August meeting, isn't it?
Yes, Chair, that's correct. 10th of August, you had one item scheduled for it, which is maintained schools budgets. But today also you're adding another item, which is the draft action plan following the Ofsted inspection for Saturday. Also, can I just remind members that you have been sent an invite for the workshop together with corporate resources, which will be talking about innovations update, and part of it is relevant to children and education scrutiny committee. And then September, you have so far 3 items with possibility of another regional fostering hubs, children and young people plan and deployment of high needs provision capital allocation, and potentially, subject to obviously your discussion with the relevant officers, from education structure change, which is to approve proposed changes to education instruction from alongside associated school organization changes and implementations arrangements.
Okay, members. So as always, the items for agenda will be down to the vice chair and myself. We'll look. But what I will ask, I was going to say to officers in the room, but through Heather, obviously it would be helpful if suggestions for the August meeting come forward sooner rather than later, because I know that there are some decisions that are likely to come from it. Any other points? Nick?
I send my apologies for the 10th of August being Spain for the eclipse.
Thank you. Ruth?
At some point, depending on when they're published, it would be good for us to have a look at education attainment results for this academic year, if possible, please.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you. Education attainment. Anything else? Okay, members, thank you very much for your time. We now move, that's item 10 of our agenda done, so we now move on to closing. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Meeting closed.